Hello and welcome to another session of How Does This Work in Music? I'm Karen, and you can see that I always get excited about exploring how something is happening. And today our topic is binary slash simple binary slash basic binary. They all mean the same thing versus rounded binary. When we are working with our melody writing at the grade 10 level, we have the option of either choosing binary or rounded binary. And so typically what happens is, as students are transitioned between grade 9 and grade 10 material, we get you used to doing the grade 10 level melody in rounded binary, and then once that has some comfort, we show you how to do simple binary so that you can try it out for a month and then make the decision as to which one you're going to focus on in your exam preparation. So first of all, let's just stop and say, what is the difference between rounded binary and binary? So we are all very used to rounded binary now. We've been writing melodies in this form for quite some time. It is a binary form because there are two sections shown by the repeat signs. And in this case, as part of the second set of repeats, we have a little reference to the A. It has to be at least 2 bars, and for it to be rounded binary, it must be the opening 2 bars. If we are talking about what is basic binary, binary, or simple binary, it is 2 sections. Again, the repeat signs show us that. The A section is sitting there, the B section is sitting there. There is no complete reference to a couple of bars in a row of the A section. So within melody writing, the easiest way for us to become comfortable with a new form is to start off by saying, let's print out the sheet that is a PDF below, and I'm going to invite you to do it 2 times. And then just stop the video for a couple seconds, go off and reprint, and hi, you're back. So now you have 2 printings, and some of the answers on both of these sheets are going to be identical. The first sheet, we are going to be doing rounded binary form, and then the second sheet, we're going to be doing simple binary form, or just binary. So the first thing we do is we look at the example and notice that it's in 4/4 time and that there are 2 quarter notes in the upbeat position, which means that anacrusis gives us a gavotte. So it could have been in 4/4 time or 2/2 time. Gavottes are represented in both. This one happens to be 4/4. I do invite you to really sort of look at that and understand that 2/2 is different and has typically got a different set of rhythms for the Roman numbers, the harmonic rhythm, than the gavotte that is in 4/4 time. And we look at this and we see it's got 1 sharp. Our options are G major and E minor. The very first note of all is a D natural. In the key of E minor, that would not be the first note. So let's set aside that and say we're definitely in the key of G major. So now what I'd like to do is to say, let's do what we should always do and analyze everything in this line. So on the anacrusis, we have a 5 at the first count, and then it goes to 5/6/5 on the second count, and then we get to a downbeat. GBG is a 1. Count 3 is a 4, Roman 4, and then on count 4 it becomes 4 in first inversion. In bar 2, we open with a dominant, a capital 5, and then that E I'm circling as a passing tone. On count 2, it goes to 5 in first inversion, and then 5/6/5 under the C. And then on count 3, we have a 1, and count 4, the 1 is turned to 1 in first inversion. Yes, we need to do all of these inversions. Bar 3, we have the 4 chord on the downbeat. The D that is after the beat of count 2 is a neighbor note. When we go to count 3, we have a 2 in first inversion, passing tone, 2 in root position, 2 in first inversion that has become a 7th, so that's 2, 6, 5. And then we have over the bar line the 5 for 2 counts, and that is our first phrase. Now, before we go anywhere, let's go back and write in what our intervals are and see what any of our unessential notes are in the treble. So when we start at the very opening, from D up to D is an 8, F sharp to C is a T for tritone, and yes, it does resolve immediately in contrary motion by step. So we have our 1, which is a 3 above it. Above the G is an 8. Above the E is a 3, and then we have a 2 above the D, but it's in brackets because that's a passing tone. And then 6, we're into bar 2, 8, 7 in brackets because of the passing tone we've already marked. 3, T for F sharp to C, and again it resolves in contrary motion by step to a 3. Above the C is a 4 in brackets because that's a passing tone, and then a 3 on count 4 from B to D. Going into bar 3, we have 3, 2 in brackets, 8, 6 in brackets, 6, 7 in brackets because of the passing tone in the bass, 8, 5, 3, 3. So at this point, I'm going to show you what mine looks like and freeze the video and make sure you're matching. So it does feel like we're taking a little bit too much time to do this. But I have to say to you, in the long run, there are 2 benefits. We actually save time because you don't have to keep checking for what can I do and what can I not do. And 2, you're actually aware of what you can and cannot do, which means that what you're writing is more effective. So I encourage everybody to not skip any of those steps. Even once you get used to doing the grade 10 melody question and feel like you're on top of it, Karen said, good for you, you're passing, and we still have months and months of prep to go before we're going to write the exam. We'll still be doing it. Okay, so if we're going to make this one into rounded binary, fill in that blank as rounded binary. And of course, you know that what we need to do is to come down. There we go. We need to come down to line 4 and say, I've got to make this match the opening. Please be sure that your rounded binariness includes the upbeat. So our rounded binary starts with a D to C at the end of line 3 because that's where the upbeat to the next section is. Your A is there. Okay, hang on, I'm just going to pop this in and show you that if we were to mark in our letters, our A with the prime would start here. And we must have upbeat plus these 2 bars quoted. And so you could see I copied bar 1 for bar 13. I copied bar 2 for bar 14. I started bar 15 on the same note as the one given up in bar 3, and then I decided that I wanted to end on a high G, which would mean that I wouldn't quote more of bar 3 because it takes you downward. So I went up instead and came to a G for a half note in the final bar, full bar of tonic. Mine is above the staff. And the bass under that is G to G, an octave leaping down. So now all I did to finish off my rounded binary was this. Full copy, first note. Then I went up instead of down. You can see I noodled with this. I've got smudges under here. Even Karen has to noodle at times. And then down here, you can see D, D, G, G. This is that cello line I'm encouraging people to do. It keeps this guy so that we know we'll have a 5 in root position. Now, the one thing is watch your shape, because we cannot go beyond an octave. If this D was up here and this D was down, this would be G up to G an octave plus up to the 12th. And we don't want that. So we want a change of direction as you move from the 5 to the 1, so that we have 2 downs separated by an up. But there is our rounded binary. We're good to go. We write authentic cadence in G major. At the end of line 1, we would have said half cadence in G major. And right now we already have half of the bars filled in. Now, what we want to do next is to compose our second and third melody lines. A lot of times people find it helpful to do line 3 next, so that when they do the second phrase, while they're doing it, their subconscious is working on what chords they're representing, and you can immediately then turn around and put in the bass clef. So it saves a bit of time. So let's do bar, bar. So I guess it would be the pick up to bar 9, which is line 3, and your B section. This is a contrasting phrase to the opening. So those melody lines like we did in grade 8 rudiments. So what I've done here is I said, you know, if the upbeat to the original A is stepping down in quarter notes, I should continue this particular idea of stepping down in quarter notes. So what I did here is I thought I'm still in D major. We must assert the key of D major here. So I went F sharp, E, D, and then when I leapt up an octave instead of a sixth. Now, anytime you have a leap, that would mean a fourth or more, by the way, we do want you to move in the opposite direction in the melody. So my next note, I put a C sharp in. And I thought, okay, so at the beginning of this bar, I've got a 1 chord in D major. So now I'm going to have a 5 chord in D major, and I'm going to resolve that 5, making sure I've got my C sharp in here, so that the leading tone rises to the tonic, and then I will return to my home key. So my opening of this phrase looks like this. So you can see I went F sharp, E, D up an octave, and then this is sort of upside down to what the given was. This leading tone C sharp is not resolved by this D because it's a passing tone. This C sharp is resolved by the D that's on count 1 over here. And this is where you're pivoting back to G major because we now put a C natural there. So what you can do there is think of it like this. That this 1 of D becomes the dominant of G major and continues on. So this was 5, and this was a 1 chord that it was representing. Notice that we do want to make sure when we write down notes that they represent a chord. And then right here I've got an A passing tone F sharp. So that certainly seemed like some sort of 5 chord there. So then this 1 in here I created. And what I did here, if you look up here, and then look down here, you can see that I took the 3 steps down and a skip up to 3 steps up and a skip down. So it's inverted and backwards at the same time. And that's a way of making something sound completely new because our ear doesn't pick up that that's what the relationship is, but the ear does hear it as being cohesive. So taking something and doing it, but notice I kept the passing tone on the same count of the beat. And now I got a little creative with my bass line. You do not need to get this creative. In my bass, I went G for my 1, C would be 2 to 5, but I went, you know, it would sound cool if I added a C sharp in here. C, C sharp, D, D. So that's showing that you know that a 2 in first inversion and a 5 in first inversion of 5, the only difference between those two chords is the accidental. So that's a way of showing that you have an understanding of grade 10. I call it vocabulary because they're different chords that we're adding into your musical language. And sometimes those are the things that if you forgot a dot or you have a tail that's wrong and an otherwise really exemplary piece, sometimes if you do that little bonus little element there, we can sort of go put a square bracket and say, we noticed it was a slip, but we're not going to subtract for it. So I do encourage people to get creative on that. So in here, you could hear me use a clear pivot. The 1 of D major became the 5, and then I threw in a C natural as soon as I could after I reached that so that we heard the return to G major. Put in your phrase sign, please. Put in all of your Roman numbers and label that as a half cadence in G major. You are not obligated to putting the capital B at the beginning of this line. Having said that, I find that if people put in their capital A's and capital B's, they have a much more consciousness about what they are doing, and they don't forget the moments that, oh, I get to do a copy of something at this point because it's been brought forward. So now we're going to go back to do phrase 2. Now, phrase 2, I am again going to say to myself, the upbeat was 2 quarter notes, and I had 2 quarter notes in both the treble clef and the bass clef. So I'm going to maintain that. And for logic of the progression, make upbeats 5 in function. So I don't want to copy that exactly. This can be a similar phrase or a contrasting phrase. So when I say similar, it means you can keep some things the same while altering others. But you're going to have to alter something in order to get to the key of D major. So it is okay if you choose to quote the first bar and a half and then do your change. That is totally legitimate. Now, Karen tends to go, what else can I do? So one of the things that I encourage people to think about in a gavotte is that the 5-5-4-2 going to a 1-6 at the beginning of the next line is a marvelous upbeat. It keeps your 5 going, but it has quarter note movement in both hands. If you needed an 8th note, you can stick in a passing tone. We don't want one here, but if there had been in the original upbeat, then we would honor that here as well. But 5-5-4-2-1-6 is absolutely awesome. And by thinking about that right away, you have actually thought of, I know how I'm starting both my treble and my bass. So I started with an F sharp, A, and then I resolved my F sharp, which is my leading tone, to G. Now, in the given, they have a B up to a G. That's a 6th. And we know if we flip a 6th, it becomes a 3rd. So I went G to B instead of B to G. And then I said, I've got F sharp up a 3rd to A, down a 2nd. Let's go up a 3rd, down a 2nd, up a 3rd. And I had a mini sequence in the treble. Now, I didn't end up making the sequence happen in the bass, but if there's not going to be something that imitates the rhythm of bar 1, try to go into what can be, the ear can hear as a mini sequence. Now, I could have added an 8th note. Actually, I think I will. Okay, so we have G, B, A, B, C sharp, and of course the leading tone needs to go to D, and I had it go up a third as well. Now in here I'm watching to make sure that I don't go past an A up here before I go down. So after I did my D to my F sharp, I resolved it to my G, but I made sure I did not think of that as GBD. I want to make sure I get away from stressing the GBD chord. So when we come back to do our bass line, you're going to find that I use a 2 instead of a 4. Now at this point, I'm doing eighth notes because I don't have very many eighth notes going on, and there are clearly eighth notes in the given. So I did stepwise motion down to put my new leading tone, my C sharp, on count 1. I go up to my tonic and I set myself up, and you can see this again is derived from here. And I move by 4 eighth notes into my held new tonic. Okay, so now the question is, what do we do with the bass line? Well, we notice that in our given, when we went through our numbers, all of the numbers that are not in brackets, all of our chord tones, we have 8, T, 3, 6, and 1, 5. That's what needs to happen down here. So that is why do not skip putting in your own intervals, because sometimes you guys think you're okay, and as soon as we put in the intervals, we can find problems. Indeed, one time I didn't, and it was recently, and it turned out when we put in our intervals, there was a set of parallels there. So I should be doing it too. And that's why mine looks like that. Okay, so if we are starting on a 1 in first inversion at the beginning of the first bar in line 2, because the 1 in first inversion resolves the 5-4-2, the 7th must go down a second. I think I'm going to do a voice exchange and go B down to G if the treble is going G up to B. Voice exchange is your friend. It results in contrary motion and a good cohesive idea of what a single Roman number can do in a joining of 1 and 2 or 3 and 4. Notice we're following the rules for our Roman numbers as we do this that we would for our rests. It's our harmonic rhythm. Do join 1 and 2 or 3 and 4, but never 2 and 3. So I wouldn't go to like the 5 chord on count 2 and stay on the 5 chord to count 3, because that's joining the Roman number in that situation. So here we go. We have now got an A to a C sharp in the treble. So I'm going to use that 5-5-4-2-1-6 again and do a little bit with this. Now, I'm not going to quite talk myself through all of this with it hidden. So you can see I did 1-6. I put in a passing tone. Up here there was 1/8 note in this bar. I made sure I got it in. It just was in a different hand. Or I could put it in here because I've got 2 versions going here. You could also put it in here and then not have it in there. So I went 5-4-2-1-6 came down to 1, and then in A major 5-5-4-2-1-6 came down to 1. And then I said, what can I do here? We are now right before the end of the whole A section, and we want lots of movement. Doesn't mean everything needs to be eighth notes, but you can see I have my first time where both hands have eighth notes as we move to this big cadence. And I made sure that these eighth notes went in contrary motion. I snuck in this 5-6 of 5 here to get my tritone that resolves in contrary motion over the bar, because that's something that really sounds good. I had to have my 5 resolve to 1-6 or another 5. I didn't want 5 for the whole thing because the Gavotte was just inviting me to have more chord changes, so I went 5 to 6, And then, of course, 2-5-1 is an excellent way to have a good cadence there. Now, I just talked you through that quickly. That process with putting in the counterpoint and then putting in all of your numbers, which you can see I've got popped in there. So freeze this and match it up. And then we check the time. I've got time. So now we're going to go to our simple binary. And here is where I'm going to say stop and just copy what we just did for phrase 2 in your counterpoint, your progression, how you get to your new key, totally the same as it was before. So what happens in binary? Well, some of my most inventive students that love to do composing for me, they like to just do everything new. That's perfectly legitimate. Just be careful that if you're doing everything new, that you've got elements that keep referring back to what's on the page. Suddenly having one dotted eighth followed by a 16th would not be appropriate to only have it in this area after the kind of A section that we had. So it's one of those things that I do recommend being consistent with how you, I'm just trying to make sure I can set up my examples for you, with how you approach it if you're going to go completely off grid. Now, if you want to do a simple binary / just straight binary that has a bit of a formula, at the beginning of line 3, you do the opening bar and a half transposed to the dominant key. And then you make sure that you resolve in the second bar a leading tone from whatever you could find to do as a leading tone at the end of the first bar, so that you could then go back to the key of G major, and then legitimately you can copy the end of the first phrase exactly as is. So my B is like this. You can see this is, it starts as the opening transposed. I went down a fourth, so we weren't in the stratosphere with ledger lines. And then I just changed my last note. Instead of going down, I went back to the leading tone so I could resolve, because that sharp is still there, I could resolve my leading tone over the bar line. Clearly, this is D major. But then immediately I put the C natural after that so that we could hear that we were back in G major. And then I said, how can I get, oh, once I get to this B, I can copy this. So in simple binary, you use information from the first line as the source for here. And then now this is going to be our completely contrasting phrase that you can choose to do whatever you want with it, as long as you are in keeping with the given. I often say try inversion at this point so that the rhythm stays the same and most of the chord symbols stay the same, but we have a new sound. Now, before I let you go, let's have a listen. And I'm just going to wheel over my chair. There we go. So if we listen first to the rounded binary, 1 through 1, 2. So we definitely hear that that ends in D major. And one of the things I do there, if I'm choosing to do simple binary, I try to find a way to have the highest note of the piece in this area so that there is a climactic element. Now, what I just played was actually the rounded binary, and now I'm going to play for you the simple binary, and you will hear the style-wise, the style does stay the same. 1, 2, 1, 2. And it clearly had a different idea in phrase 4 for my simple binary. Some people do use information from the end of line 2 to influence bars 15 and 16. It is fine for those two cadences to be transpositions of each other. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to take a moment and show you each of these so that you can do a check. This is your simple binary. And this is your rounded binary. Notice that we still put in all of our phrasing and name all of our cadence. And there you have it. The easiest way to learn something new is to start with something you already know how to do. There are times that as you go into the exploration of drawing melodies in simple binary, that it might be easier to actually do it 2 times as we just did today, where you do it once in rounded binary and once in simple binary, so that you are consciously setting the difference in your mind. And because phrase 2 that has double the work with the counterpoint and all of the analysis is the same for both, you are really just focusing on that element that is the difference between simple binary and rounded binary, the B section. And that's it for today. Thank you for having an exploration of melody writing in binary form.